Hey everybody, I'm Zac.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth.
On Now You Know.
All right, well, thank you so much for being here, David. We have David Fraser-Hidalgo. He is a delegate in the Maryland General Assembly. And the reason we have you on the show, not only are you a fan of the show, which is, that's big bonus points for getting on the show, but you are working really hard every day to get clean legislation passed, being in the legislature in Maryland. And that's a really important job. And we wanted to tell more people about your job and how you got it and how you do it. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you both for having me. Let me start out by saying I am indeed a fan of the show. So I came into the legislature in 2013, and I do a lot of environmental work, a lot of what we call, clean cars legislation, and a lot of just environmental legislation. And often I learn quite a bit that I take back to my committee and educate my fellow members in the General Assembly from both of you, because you just have like a great show. I can't thank you enough. And I know I've told you before, but I do. I mean, there are times in committee where I'm able to quote things that I learned from both of you, as well as other places. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So you can go like, the ocean is on fire.
I saw that. Yeah. I won't add the other part that Jesse added. I want to add that, but I can't.
It's so nice that you've learned some stuff from us. Hopefully we can learn some stuff from you. So from my understanding of government, from what I learned in public school, was that there's the three branches of government. You got the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch.
Nice.
And so you're in the legislative branch, and there's two things in that. And there's the Senate and there's the House of Representatives. And so you're a senator, you're a congressperson.
Yeah, so I'm a Maryland state delegate. In Maryland, we have delegates and senators.
Okay, wait. You're talking about Maryland. I only in school we learned that there's senators and that there's House of Representatives. What are you talking about with Maryland?
From the federal level, that is completely true. So, right, we have Congress, we have the House, and we have the Senate. And then in Maryland has its own government, the same thing as the federal government does, right? We have our own House and we have our own Senate. So in Maryland, I'm a Maryland state delegate, and we have 141 delegates and 47 senators. And it works fairly similarly to the way it works on the federal level. And each state all around the country has this same setup in one way or another. They're either called assembly people or delegates or representatives, and they all operate the same way. And often there's so much more action. In other words, there's so much more to do on the state level than there is on the federal level.
So for something to become a law in Maryland, walk us through the process. Let's say I'm a citizen of Maryland and I've got a great idea for a law, what do I do?
Oftentimes, as delegates and senators, we don't often come up with our own ideas. Sometimes we do, but often people come to us and they come up with an idea and we think about it and we start researching it. And if we think it's a good idea and we think that it can pass, we take it to bill drafting and they'll draft a bill. So in Maryland, and I'm sure it's the same all across the country, the bill drafters, you basically explain to them what it is that you're trying to achieve, and they're attorneys that write bills. This is what they do for a living. They're employed by the state, and they will either sit down with you, me, or whomever, and actually draft a bill to try to accomplish your goal. At that point, you can take the bill when your session comes. In Maryland, we have a 90-day session. That means all of our bills, all of the laws must be passed in 90 days. It starts in mid-January and runs through mid-April. That's all we have. We have those 90 days. And then at the very last day, it's called sine die, which is Latin for basically death day. And if your bills don't get across, they die. So you have 90 days to get your bill done. I get my bill back from bill drafting. I either mark it up and make some changes and ask the attorneys to go back through and make some changes, or I take the bill, and what I do is I go through and I find co-sponsors. So I'll go along the House floor and I'll go to my neighbors or other people that I think are interested, and I'll say, hey, look, I have this Clean Cars Act where we're going to give tax incentives to buying the purchasing of clean cars. You need to sign on to it. You usually get 10 or 20 or 30 or 40. I had a carbon pricing bill for the last couple of years that I've been working on climate exchange with. And we got a record of 59 co-sponsors, which is huge. Then once you get all your co-sponsors and you're ready, you basically do, in Maryland, we do what we drop the bill in the hopper, which basically means it's official. It then goes out to the internet, to the interweb. Everybody can see the bill. Everybody can see the co-sponsors. That's basically when all the people that have interest in that bill come forward. So if it's clean cars, right, if it's incentives for cars or anything to do with that, then that's usually when the manufacturers will come to the table. Sometimes homeowners associations for a right to charge kind of will come to the table if it's that kind of bill. In this case, sometimes the car dealerships come to the table as well, just depending on where they are. And some towns and other communities, some of the local communities will come as well. Then we have a bill hearing. The bill gets assigned by the Speaker's office to a specific committee. And in my case, for this bill, it usually gets assigned to the Environment and Transportation Committee, which I happen to be on. So it works great. It goes to the Environment and Transportation Committee. We have a bill hearing, and that bill hearing usually involves, for me, I bring myself to the table and anybody else I can get. If I can, pull Tesla with me or pull Rivian with me or Arcimoto, which I've done on several bills in the past, they'll come up to the table with me. This last year it was virtual, but usually it's up to the table and we present the bill. And then there's 24 members of the committee and they usually ask a bunch of questions. Some of those questions are designed to be helpful. They're like theater questions. And some of those questions are specifically designed for theater. And some of those questions are really designed to like gotcha questions. And I love the gotcha questions because I love the subject matter so much that the gotcha questions just give me an opportunity to just kind of drone on and on. And then after the bill hearing, after we present our bill, then we have usually a couple panels that come up behind us that are pro and or against. So usually the Petroleum Institute will come up against and they'll argue about how we have to have a level playing field. But in my case, I've already usually inoculated against that because I'll ask a colleague to ask me a question about that. And then I'll talk about the $100 billion a year that are given to make the playing field not level. And then and I'll say, well, if you want a level playing field, then spend $15 for a gallon of gasoline and we'll sometimes have something close to a level playing field. Then that's pretty much it. The bill goes to a subcommittee. It gets talked about in the subcommittee. It gets voted up or down in the subcommittee. If it gets voted up in the subcommittee, it goes to the full committee for a vote. If it gets voted down, it goes to the full committee, and usually there's an explanation as to why it got voted down. Usually that's pretty much the death knell of a bill if it comes out of subcommittee down. It's not always, but I would say in about 99% of the cases, it gets a full vote. If we get however many delegates happen to be in the committee, if it gets a full vote, if we can get 13 votes, if there's 24, then it gets booted onto the House floor. And sometimes there's a floor fight. Sometimes there's not. It depends on, whether the folks that are against a particular bill, in this case, if we're talking about electric vehicles, if there's some people that are feeling rather frisky, they will get up on the House floor, and usually there'll be a big debate that goes back and forth. And then we get it out of the House, it goes over to the Senate, and it gets assigned to the same thing. It gets assigned to a committee in the Senate. Then I usually go over with, again, a group of folks, and I try to make some phone calls ahead of time to get some of my colleagues in the Senate on that committee. Just kind of get them prepped up, and kind of give them an idea of what they might hear on the other side of the issue. And then sometimes I'll text them, can you ask me this or can you ask me that? Sometimes just to get a little extra help. And then they have the bill hearing there. And then if we get it out of the Senate, it goes to the Senate floor. And if they get enough votes in the Senate floor, then it goes to the governor. And in Maryland, there are three options for a bill to becoming a law. To Jesse, to your original question, the governor can sign the bill and it goes into law on an effective date. Usually it's like October 1 of that year. Or the governor can ignore it and it goes into law automatically, or the governor can veto it. And the vetoing part is where it gets complicated because the governor's, usually in a variety of states balancing a lot of political interests. And, well, does it make sense if I veto it? Can I override the veto? Can I not override the veto? Will the General Assembly override the veto? What will that mean? What are the politics? Who's running for office? What's the next election cycle look like? That kind of thing. And then, and that's about it. So that's kind of the process. That can start in the House. It can start in the Senate. Sometimes the governor has their own bill and they ask somebody to put the bill in for them. Usually there's kind of departmental bills that are pretty standard just to make some changes in law or update law. There are a lot of places that a bill can get kind of gummed up along the way. In Maryland, we hear about, in 90 days, just to give you an idea, because I think I mentioned to you that all the actions on the state level. In Maryland, we have a 90-day session, and we hear in the General Assembly, there are about 3,000 bills that are introduced in that 90-day period.
Well, okay, so I want to talk about the 90 days for a second. So in Maryland, you've got 90 days or else it's dead. You have an interesting story about a bill that kind of shows how this process works that came down to the last minute practically, and it involves Tesla of all things. Can you tell us that story?
This was absolutely kind of a crazy bill. I think it was 2015, and another delegate had put in the bill to allow Tesla to sell directly to the public. The bill that you have talked about numerous times on your channel, the bill that hopefully Texas will get around to passing soon, since they're opening this massive factory in their state. And it basically allows them. So Tesla came in originally, I think they wanted something like 6 or 7 dealerships or dealership licenses in Maryland so they could sell directly to the public. And essentially what happened was there was some basically negotiations back and forth between dealerships, other manufacturers, not Tesla, other manufacturers. You got to go back 6 years now, right? So you got to put it in context. At the time, Tesla was like the number one EV player. There was nobody else on the horizon at that time. So it came to my committee, and that particular delegate, his name is Delegate Resnick. He put the bill in. He got me up to speed on it, and I was like, "This is amazing. This is so cool." So it was I kind of got tasked with hand holding the bill. It wasn't my bill, but I got super vested in the bill. We went back and forth with manufacturers, dealerships, big meetings trying to negotiate. Is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 8? Is it 10? Is it 4? And in the end, we passed it out of the House with, I think, 5 or 6 dealership licenses. It went over to the Senate because there was not a Senate cross-file. Sometimes you can put in the same exact bill. I should have said this to you, Jesse, earlier, but sometimes if you have somebody on the other side, you can both put in the same exact bill. It's called a cross-file. This bill I don't believe it had a cross-file. So it went over to the Senate, where it sat for a month and did nothing. And then this is the crazy kind of things that can happen. The bill came out on sine die at 11:36 or 11:37. They passed it out. They passed it out of the Senate. So it's 11:30 at night
on the last day.
On the last day. So it's 11:30 at night, and the bill comes out. And my chairman, Kumar Barve, who I convinced to buy a Tesla, he bought one, and so did his wife. 2. So he's sitting next to me, and at that time he didn't know that much about Teslas, and nobody really knew that. I mean, it was just everything was happening so fast. I sit next to him on the House floor, and he kind of nudges me and goes, "Hey, you know that Tesla bill that you were working on?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "It just got out of the Senate. I'm going to ask the Speaker if we can go off the floor so that we can vote on it as a committee." And I'm looking at my watch, and I'm going, "Oh God, it's late." So I think this is my 3rd year as a delegate, so I was still pretty new, and I will tell you, I was a little freaked out. Tesla was up in the balcony along with their lobbyist, and they're texting me, and then the other delegate is texting me, and so Kumar's like, "Yeah, this is on you." They call me DFH because it's longer than David Fraser-Hidalgo. Everybody gets it all mixed up, so they just DFH. DFH, this is on you. And I'm a little freaked out. So we walk out, and we're standing right outside, kind of between the General Assembly's main hall and the Speaker's office. And there's a photocopy machine. I mean, it's a little narrow hallway. And the state troopers are there, and we're just sitting there in a big huddle. I mean, think about it like a football huddle. And my chairman, Chair Barve, he goes, "So that Tesla bill came out of the Senate for 4 dealership licenses." So what the Senate did is they just changed it. They just changed it, and they said, "Well, we'll send it over there. And if it passes, it passes. And if it doesn't, who cares?" They didn't care. But so they this is what it is. So they dropped, I think, 2 more dealerships down from 5 to 4 or 6 to 4. And basically you either pass it or the bill's dead. So that's it. Well, I mean, Tesla wants to sell cars, and I want Tesla to sell cars, and I want electric vehicles, and I want to clean the air. So the chairman goes, "Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo, DFH, give your speech. Here's your chance." So I basically said that. I said, look, this is a brand new car company. They only sold like 32,000 cars last year. They need the help. And the problem is that these car dealerships, they don't really understand how EVs work, or they don't understand the model. They're not really selling them. And so I think it's imperative that we do this. I mean, I think it should be more than 4 dealerships licenses, but this is what we have. And, we got 43 minutes or 23 minutes or whatever it is. So I said, I think we should pass it the way it is. And another delegate says, no, we should send it. We should change it and not conform to the Senate version and send it back. And then I said, if we do that, everybody here knows the bill is dead. The bill will die. If we can't send it back. There's 20 minutes left. And then I said, I think we should just pass it. And so I said something like, I move that we pass the bill as it is. And there's another delegate that happened to represent a specific area of Baltimore in which there was a General Motors, I think it was like a General Motors electric motor plant or something. And he blurts out, this was hilarious. He kind of blurts out and says, General Motors hates this bill. And just blurts out, General Motors hates this bill. And I'm like, okay, well. So we go through the votes. They go through, because it's so late, they go through the vote by vote, all 24 members of the committee. And we got 13 votes. We needed 13. So it was 13 to 11.
Wow.
So we got 13 votes. And we go back out on the House floor, and the lobbyist is sitting up in the balcony. It's kind of funny. And Tesla's with them. And they're looking at me like, what happened? And I'm like up by 1. And they're like, just, and then Delegate Resnick, who I'm very close with, he looks at me, he's like, what happened? I'm like, up by 1. He's like, woo. 10 minutes later, they read it across the board. It gets voted out. It gets voted, so we conform to the Senate version, and we have a law, and Tesla can now have some dealership licenses. But it was insane. It was pretty crazy, because you didn't know what was going on. And I had only been in the General Assembly like two years. I think it was my 3rd session. So I was pretty freaked out. Second session.
Wow, that's how the sausage is made there.
Right. So how did you get it to pass? I mean, who was that final vote?
So the crazy thing is that there is another person, I'm not going to name any of these names, but there's another person that for whatever reason is just not a union person. So we get to midnight, the bill gets across, you start to get nervous even with that, because the deadline is the deadline. If there's a bunch of bills in front of your bill and you don't get across, right? I had a bill just this last session that died that way, just out of time. So we pass the bill, 12 o'clock goes by, everybody, leaves the House floor, hugs, kisses, we'll see you next year kind of a thing. And I'm in the House office building, and one of the delegates on the committee comes up to me and they go, hey, DFH, you know why I voted for that Tesla bill, don't you? I'm like, actually, I have no idea why I voted for that Tesla bill. I hate unions. And I was like, what? And they're like, I hate unions. And I'm like, okay. So that was it.
So it had nothing to do with like the goodness or badness of the bill. It was just like, wow. Almost like us in Boston, we vote for any team that, is playing the Yankees, right? So it's just the same thing there.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing is while making the sausage, you don't know what everybody's angle is. On that particular bill, it was just like, one person had something in their district that they were looking out for jobs, and another person wasn't really a big union fan. I get it. And so those two things collided, at 11:37 or 11:43 on Sunny Day PM, and it worked.
Why does Maryland do this 90-day cycle? I mean, first of all, I think I want to just move down to Maryland, run for state rep, and have a 90-day work year. I mean, it sounds awesome. We're talking to you in July, right? So you're off right now, right? You're just sitting on the beach every day, right? You're not working at all when you're not in that session. Is that correct?
So no, that's not correct. So Maryland, we have what's called a citizen legislature, and it's derived from, the revolution. And the reason that it's in that particular time, in January through April, is because that's most of the time when people aren't farming. They're not in their fields. So they're not in their fields, they're not farming, so that's the best time to pass state law. Because in the regular summer, the spring or the fall, everybody's working, right? Everybody's working the fields. Most of the people, it was a very agrarian nation at that time. So it's still left from those days. And as a matter of fact, when we adjourn on the weekends, like we go home for the weekends, we usually live in Annapolis Monday to Friday, but when we go home on the weekends, usually we don't have committee hearings on Friday, and we don't come in until 8 o'clock on Monday night. And the reason for that is because if you're in one part of Maryland, you could be on your horse or on your buggy for, you might have to stay over somewhere. So we don't like chime in on Monday nights until 8:00 at night.
I mean, I totally get that. That makes sense for the 1700s, early 1800s. But now that we're in, 2021, why didn't Maryland just go to a full year legislature?
That's a good question. A lot of people ask. It's considered a part-time job, but the other 9 months, I have, today's the middle of the summer and I have 3 Zooms today. So I already had one call this morning, and it's just a lot of juggling. It's just the way it is. And for the job in the state of Maryland, you can pack on some serious hours in the off season, dealing with a lot of transportation issues, a lot of environmental issues, constituent services. It's a lot of work. I usually put in 10 or 15 to 30 or 40 hours during a regular week outside of session.
Now, this is super fascinating to me. I ran for state rep when I was 20 years old back in 1990 because I used to watch it on closed circuit TV all the time, and I just got into it. But for a lot of people, this is probably the first time they're hearing about, they knew there's a state house somewhere in their state, but this is probably the first time they're hearing about how it works. How can more people get into this? How can, I really feel like our educational system has let us down in that they taught the 3 branches of government,
but they're only federal.
Yeah, basically, right.
I learned, this stuff. I was in a state, they had state government, and yet we didn't learn anything about state government. We didn't learn anything about municipal government, nothing like that. It's just kind of frustrating because, so I want to take one step back because, you said that people will get in contact with you and want to make a bill. Do they have to walk down to the state house? Do they have to know where you live and knock on your door? Do they have to know your phone number? How does it work? How do I, get in communication with you? And then what does that look like? Do I just kind of march up to you and go, I want you to pass this bill? And you go, okay, I must do that. How does that work?
That's a great question, Jesse. And so over the years, one of the things that has changed, Zach, to your point about the legislative year, is that I represent about 130,000 people in my district. So I represent District 15 in Montgomery County, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. It's a very diverse district. There's ag, there's population density, it's everything. It's actually a great district. I love it. And with that said, there's always usually a kind of a small group of people that are very active. And the trick is to kind of get more than a small group of people to be active. And given where we are today, they can handwrite me a letter, which nobody does anymore. They could type out a letter, which people don't really do that either. They could send an email, they could send a fax, they can hit me on Facebook or Twitter. There are so many ways for people to get a hold of me. And so across the country, for all the listeners out there, right, you have local, which is usually your county council. You have your county executive, and then you have the state side, and there's also the municipalities, right, Jesse, to what you were saying earlier. Then you have the state side, and you have the federal side. So you just reach out to them through one of those means, and you ask them for a meeting, either a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting. I take meetings all the time with constituents on the phone or over coffee. I'm I'll meet you at Starbucks, and I'll have 3 or 4 of them in a row, boom, 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 boom. And I'll talk to people. And a lot of times people have these great ideas. And then that's how it goes. You have to just reach out to those representatives. And those representatives, if they're good, they're excited to meet with you. Because also, to your point, people aren't as engaged as they should. If people realize, Zach, I saw your eyes pop out when I told you we hear 3,000 bills a year. We do an enormous amount of work on the state level that the feds have nothing to do with, and that the feds don't get done. We pass more bills in 90 days than the feds pass in, several years.
Okay, so I'm a person and I want a particular thing to be put into law or to change something. And you said if your congressperson is good. What do you mean?
If they're responsive.
What if they're not responsive?
Then you find another one. So if you're talking about federal law, then you go to your congressperson, or you go to your senator's office. If you're talking on the state side, in my district, there are 3 delegates and 1 senator. It's all different all throughout the country, but there's usually more than one. And on the county side, or the municipality side, or the township side, there are often representatives that represent a certain district, but there are also at-large representatives. And the at-large representatives you can go to as well. So, for example, if your county council person or your state delegate isn't being receptive, then you just go to the at-large member, if you're talking about a county council or a city council.
What if I want my local representative to listen to me? Can I go to their manager? Can I complain?
I would say probably the most effective thing to do is, if you are one of their constituents, is to just start making noise. I guess the big platform today is really social media, but just, hey, I reached out to Congressman so-and-so's office and didn't hear back. I reached out to, city council member, delegate, senator, representative, and I didn't hear back. That usually will do it, because the last thing they want to do is be thought of as not returning their phone calls or not getting back to you, because in 2 years or 4 years, they're going to be asking for your vote. And bad news travels a lot faster than good news. Just like that, it's around the world, right? So you don't want to be known as an elected official. You don't want to be known as somebody who's not responsive to your constituents. That's the way you get unelected pretty quickly.
Well, let's talk about elections. So, I'm just assuming the only way someone can take your seat is when you die.
No, I run every 4 years.
Okay. And so if I come to you with a bill and I think you did a really good job helping me to understand it or to move it forward, how can I help you as a citizen? That's something I think most citizens don't really ask. It's just you're supposed to work for me. But how can we work for you?
I think the best way is just by talking to your friends and neighbors and other constituents and telling them, Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo did a really great job on this bill. Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo helped me with this. With the pandemic was really, really tough on everybody, and on state legislatures. I can specifically speak in Maryland. It was really tough because our offices are usually packed full of really, really good people that really want to make a difference. And when you have a pandemic and state government and everybody is completely overloaded, usually we can intercede on behalf of constituents and help them with their unemployment issues or their medical issues or really big things that sometimes people don't know how to do. And our office loves those because we can help people. But during the pandemic, it was really hard because every single call we made, they were 2,000 or 3,000 calls ahead of ours or more. So I think that, often just spreading the word and talking to people and saying, council member, congresswoman, whatever it is, really looks out for us and really helps us. And then vote. You got to get out and vote. We have to vote. We always have to raise money every year and send out mailers and convince people to continue to vote for us. Being supportive in that way, voting, telling your neighbors and friends to vote, holding parties to introduce you to people. And then when it comes time for the bill hearing, I'll usually, if it's somebody that came, I'll say, okay, we're in this together. We're married for this bill. So when the bill hearing comes, they come to Annapolis and I'll have them sit right next to me. And a lot of times I will introduce the title of the bill and I will say, this bill was derived by so-and-so. You're on, so just being there to be supportive and being active. But a lot of times I don't think people are to a lot of the points that you are making, Jesse, they don't know how much they can do on the state level if they just got engaged.
We're big proponents on this channel of people getting engaged and actually running for offices. But I think the big part that stops most people is it doesn't look like a very rewarding job. On the face of it, you just said you work till midnight a lot. You got to talk to a lot of people that all want your time. Do you feel at the end of the day when you go to bed at night that it's a rewarding job to you?
Yes. I love what I do. I can't tell you enough. The Tesla bill that I worked on, all the clean cars. In 2017, we passed a fracking ban. We banned fracking, the first state in the country to ban fracking. I think there was one other state like Maine or something, but they didn't have any frackable area. So just those alone are huge. And for my kids, I have a 12 and a 13-year-old. Just keeping them involved, just on the environmental issues alone. My daughter carries a little expandable straw with her. She tries not to take straws. We recycle, we compost everything. We have solar on our house. All of these things, I try to, as a delegate, promote because I think it's so important. We only have one Earth, right? So just from an environmental perspective, I love what I do. And then for all the other issues, helping our constituents, whether they're unemployment, insurance issues, all of that is very rewarding. I'm not going to say it isn't hard work. It is hard work. On Sunny Dive, we're there till midnight. Sometimes we work on the weekends during session. The sessions are 60, 70-hour work weeks for 90 days straight. But the rest of the year, you work and you can kind of have a little bit more ability to set your schedule. And you can meet with constituents, and you always learn stuff. You always learn things from people. People always bring up, things that you didn't know or you didn't think of, and the rest is worth it to me. Where I am in my life, it is very rewarding.
So, I mean, you must have been, born and bred, politician. You must have had politician family, and they put you into politician school, and you went to politician Hogwarts, and they taught you all the tricks, and you learned all that stuff, and then of course you got elected because your last name was Kennedy, or it's not. It's weird that it's not. So, I mean, how did that work? Like, how did you get into it, and how much preparation did you have to do to become an elected official?
The answer to your question is no, 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 and no. My dad was a federal employee and moved from New York and Philadelphia down here to Maryland, a suburb. And I was born in Ecuador. My mother was Ecuadorian. Just kind of grew up in the area. And it was just always the thought of giving back, of trying to make your part of the world a little bit better place. It was not unusual for us to have one or two kids that lived with us in our home because they had fallen on bad times and gotten kicked out of their own home or for whatever it was. And I was just always taught to give back. So when I graduated with a degree in history, and what most 20, 21-year-old kids that don't really know I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 20. So I became a police officer. I was actually a police officer, which is very, very far away from where I am now, but it is giving back to the community. And then after I left the police department, I needed to kind of unwind. So I backpacked around Southeast Asia for about a year, just trying to unwind from that job a little bit and kind of recenter myself. And then when I came back, a couple of jobs here and there, I started a tech company with my brother. And then it was in 2007 or 8, the General Assembly passed a bill because the housing market had pretty much collapsed, as we all know. So the state of Maryland was in a huge budget shortfall. So they did what's called a special session, which is they come back for a few days just to pass a bill to save the. It's unusual, but it happens in the midst of big crises. This was a big crisis. They needed to figure out how to close the gap of several $100 million. And at the time, what they did is they passed a bill called the tech tax, which is they tax technology companies. And at the time, I was running a technology firm. So I went down to Annapolis. I'm like, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. This is the most decentralized industry you can have. You can just move across the street into Virginia. You can go to Delaware. You can go to DC. You can go to Massachusetts. You can go wherever you want. And so at that particular time, the curtain kind of came back a little bit, and I started to realize that you can get things done and you can be involved and you can make change. Because I went to all of my delegates and senators that were mine, and I said, I'm your constituent. This is where I live. I vote for you or don't vote for you. I promote you or I don't promote you. And so the following year, they put another bill in to rescind the tech tax, and it went away. And that at that point, I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. I mean, there was a lot of people that were involved in that. All the chambers of commerce all got involved in it. But that was kind of the big thing. And then I still didn't think about it. And my dad was like, you should run for office. You'd be great. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Are you crazy? Why would I ever want to do that? And then, a couple of years later, I found there was an opening in my district, and I ran and totally got my butt kicked. I got shellacked. But, it makes you stronger. You got to lose a little bit to win. Even when you lose, you still win because you've educated yourself. You've learned from that loss. And then a few years later, I got in through a special appointment process. It was a pretty competitive process. Jesse, to your question, I never thought I would do this. And I've never been happier doing it.
Wow.
That's a really cool story.
So, I think so many people don't know where their politicians come from. They don't even know that state legislature exists at all. It's just when I think you were in the same boat. I mean, it wasn't until it was going to affect you directly that you really got involved. It was only when it was like, wow, this is going to directly affect me, something that they are going to do, that you even realized that it was actually going to be affecting you. And that's what got you to think about it, at least, to see that big things can happen when people get involved.
I want to talk about when you did that first run and you lost. I think that's I feel like the stopping point for most people, they get to that precipice, that edge, and they're like, I don't know anything about this. I mean, I assume you had to get nomination signatures. That usually stops a lot of people, right? I assume you had to do, some kind of nomination paper process. But what was the learning curve like? What was it? Was it scary to start that process? What got you to, like, was it just your dad saying you should do this?
Well, and let me just take a step back. What were you talking about nomination papers, Mr. I ran for state rep and know this kind of thing? Like, educate me as to what you guys are talking about.
Right. So I don't know how every state works, but in our state, if you want to get onto the ballot, you have to get a certain percentage of the voters to sign papers that say we think he or she is eligible to run. It doesn't mean I'm going to vote for them, but just means I nominate this person. Did you have to do a similar process?
In Maryland, no, we don't. I mean, my process at the time, by the time I ran, my father had passed away, so he was gone. But I've always been like pretty politically active. I just never really thought about running for anything, mostly on the presidential side. And that's the thing. People really look at the presidential politics, and they don't realize that there's so much action on the state level and local level that affects you in some ways way more than the federal level does. At the time, the people that I needed to get clearance from were my family, because it's a huge commitment. And you have to have, your family needs to be in. They need to go, you know what? You are going to make the world a better place. And by me helping and supporting you, that's going to help make the world a better place too. So I can't tell you how supportive my family was, from my brother, who drives an EV and is involved in EV ADC, and a bunch of other folks. And particularly my wife, that was like, no, this is great. I mean, we bought a Prius in 2007, well before any of this, because we wanted to make the world a better place, right? So, it's really started in Maryland. It starts really with your family, and then you have to go down to the board of elections and actually file and do all that work.
And then you kind of put your name out there, and that's, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but that's a little scary, right? Now you're actually telling the world, like, hey, I'm going to run. And then you have to start thinking about, okay, I guess posters and bumper stickers and, standing on street corners. How did that process work?
So the big thing there is you have to raise money to pay for all that stuff. So you do a lot of mailers, bumper stickers, like those kinds of things, kind of like tchotchke things that you hand out to people. And then you have to get your friends and family that believe in you. That's where it really starts. So those close people that support you, and they'll usually support you by basically to do some door knocking. They'll support you if they can financially. And then at that point, you just kind of you got to get it rolling. You got to get people in the community to believe that you are the person that can make the change, that you're the person that can do it.
When does the money come in? Like, when do the oil lobbyists start to take you out to dinner, buy you steak, and say, like, hey, why don't you vote on this bill? When does that start to happen? Like, when do I get rich from becoming the lawmaker?
Not on the state delegate side. We don't get a lot of that. I mean, we get them fighting us, and we get, some contributions from time to time, but it's nothing like I would, and I can't factually speak to the federal level other than what we all probably think happens on the federal level. But on the state level, there's not a lot. There's not a lot there. I mean, it's one state, right? It's Maryland. We have 6.1 million people. So they're not happy when I put in my carbon pricing bill every year. They get really unhappy with that. But I don't care. Like, I just go at it. I go at it like full bore. So, but maybe on the federal level, there's more of that. There's not so much on that side on the state level.
That actually is attractive to me, because that seems like more about how our government was set up. You're supposed to not really be able to be influenced that heavily by corporations, but you do need money to run. And every time you run, you need money to put your name out there and posters and all that kind of stuff. And so does that get easier over time?
It generally does. I think that once you get a track record, you've proven yourself. I think people start to have more faith. And you get some bills under your belt, or you kill some bills that you think are bad bills, and you get a reputation for being, a hard worker and effective person. And then more people kind of get attracted to you, and they write checks for, just to kind of help you run your campaign. A lot of it is really it's a lot harder in the beginning. And it's also to a degree kind of the committee that you're on. Like, some of the committees lend themselves to certain donors more than other committees. Environmental issues don't lend themselves to really big donors. They haven't in the past. But I think people are starting to transition from the term environmental issues to climate change or climate crisis. Whenever I refer to it, I always call it climate crisis, because that's where I personally believe that we are. That, facts and data support that.
You've been doing this now for a few years. Do you feel like there's been a tipping point, or that we're approaching some kind of tipping point when it comes to public opinion on these clean tech arguments or climate issue arguments?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's not fast enough for me. In the state of Maryland, just from a political perspective, we have such a wide breadth of policy issues when it comes to education and public health and the environment and everything in between. There's so much. So it's really hard for a part-time legislator, which is what we are, to really get a really good handle on all of these issues, to really fully understand. So often when I find myself in other committees or people in my committee, if there's a bill coming in that I'm unfamiliar with, I try to reach out to those folks, maybe the bill sponsor, to get a better idea of what the history of it is and or what the reasons of them are. But I deal mostly with environmental issues. So when a lot of the bigger issues, not bigger than environmental issues, but issues that are not in my committee come up on the House floor and they become big issues on the House floor, often we're trying to play, catch up, because there are such a diverse number of issues. I mean, like I said, 3,000 bills a year, you handle your own. In my subcommittee, I probably get, 90 to 100 bills in my subcommittee that I have to vet through personally, let alone all the rest. So I think there are more and more delegates and senators that are more familiar with the issue than they have been in the past, especially the 2018 election cycle. There are a lot of delegates came in that were already ready on climate issues.
Now, it seems like the system was designed probably on purpose to, only the best bills will rise to the top and get passed. And by best, I mean probably the ones that get the most attention. So they're not necessarily the best bills, which means that if it's your little bill, Jesse, that you wanted, maybe it just doesn't get enough attention to get voted on in that cycle. Are there any tricks to this game, any hacks you can tell our viewers about that help to get bills more attention?
Yeah, I mean, I would say doing your homework before you have your bill hearing and being prepared. In Maryland, we have something called the fiscal note. And when the bill writers write the bill, they send it over for a fiscal note to see how much money this is going to cost the state. And if it's a really big dollar figure, it already has a problem because it's a big dollar figure. So whenever that happens, you have to find a way of trying to negate or reduce that. If it doesn't have a big dollar figure to it, you already are past one hurdle. And just kind of staying on, getting ahead of it. Like I will often tell people that are helping me with my bills, like I will go down the list of delegates or senators. I'm like, you don't need to go to them. You don't need to go to them. You don't need to go to them. Go to that one. Go to that one. Go to that one. Go to that one. And try to convince them, especially if you can get folks from their district. So if I have a bill and I'm representing District 15 and I want to pass it, and somebody's like, well, I really want to help you, delegate. How do I help you pass this electric school bus bill? Whatever it might be, right? I will say, okay, well, who's your delegates and senator? Go talk to them because you're their constituent and tell them, I want you to vote for this bill. I want you to vote for this bill. And here's why.
Does that work? Because I feel like a lot of us are so jaded now that we're like, yeah, I could reach out to David, but he's just so busy, he's not going to listen to me. Does it work if I send you an email or a text and I say like, David, please vote for this bill?
So often that helps, but usually, emails, a lot of times you'll get like a flood. Like one particular organization will write an email and then they'll say, okay, Zac and Jesse, you send it. And then it'll say, from Zac and from Jesse, but it's the same exact email. And then I'll say to my staff, so how many did we get? 76? Okay. How many of them were personal? Oh, none of them. And I'm like, okay. Then you realize how many of them were from my district. So there's that aspect. But if I would probably say the most effective is when you hear from constituents that are vested all the time that like there's, a few dozen in my district that I just know them. I see them like, hi, so-and-so, hi, so. Like I see them all the time and I know that they're really invested in work. But if you show up in session, like, if you knock on the door and say, hey, we'd like to talk with Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo, and you have 5 or 10 or 15 people with you, like that starts to become something you look at more.
What does it mean to be like, who are these vested people who like how did they just go to the same supermarket that you do and
No, they're politically active, Jesse. There are folks that don't look at the glass as half empty, they look at the glass as half full. They look at it like, I'm going to change the world. I am not going to let everybody else change it or not change it or do nothing. I am going to get active, and I'm going to have some control over my destiny and the destiny of my children and the destiny of this planet. And they get active.
But I mean, what does that look like? I mean, they're not jogging. They're what are they doing to you?
All of the political events. So we have, pre-COVID, and now we're getting out of COVID. There's usually a lot of events. I know you guys try to stay non-political, but I'm a Democrat. So all the Democratic events that I run, whether they're state political events, local political events, local organizations like, Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, Climate Exchange. Sometimes they put on events, like there's a symposium that is coming up in a couple of months that I've been talking with you guys about. And people that are interested, they come out. So, there's a certain number of people from the county council or the county executive's office. There's a certain number of people that come out. They are active participants in the idea of a democracy.
And then I want to go to the opposite. What doesn't work with you? I mean, you did mention that, like, if you just get an email that is just a copy and paste, that doesn't work. But, like, do you like it when someone just calls you up angry? Does that work for you?
No, as a matter of fact, I had a threatening email a couple of weeks ago about somebody who threatened not to vote for me. And so I said to my staff, well, let's set up a Zoom with them. Because it's really easy to type something out. And, it's a lot harder to actually have a conversation with somebody. In this particular case, the person was unaware of what's going on in the background on very, very sensitive political issues that involve two states and infrastructure in two different states. And is just mad because things aren't going the way that he wants them to go in a particular timeline. I'm like, it's going to take a year. So, and if you keep talking like that, you could mess it up and it could take 2 or 3 years, So yeah, meanness doesn't work, at least for me. The bullying meanness, that doesn't work for me at all. But just being nice and being thoughtful, and you can be nice and you can be firm in your feelings. You just don't have to do it in a mean way. And unfortunately, today, the way politics has been running lately, sometimes people think being mean gets you somewhere. And I teach my kids that doesn't work that way. You always be nice.
Now, if you're talking to some kids right now, because I know there's some kids watching, any age, middle school, high school, whatever, and they might be a little interested. Maybe they got a little, this looks like it's interesting.
Or maybe they're 79 years old.
Sure.
Or maybe they're 100.
Sure.
I mean, doesn't matter the age of the child. You're always a kid in my eyes.
Good point. What's some advice on how to get more involved, either towards government? I mean, because this seems like a big step to maybe do the state government. Is there something I can do a little smaller to start off that doesn't sound so scary?
Just getting involved at any kind of leadership position, where someone can maybe mentor you and help get you to a higher position, any kind of policy decision. A lot of kids get involved in student government in school, and they have an active SGA or a board of education. A lot of folks will, they're stay-at-home moms or dads, or sometimes they're not stay-at-home moms and dads, and they're just working for their kids. And next thing you know, they find themselves arguing or articulating a position about school buses or about districting or curriculum, and before you know it, they're running for the school board, and then the school board, before you know it, they're running for delegate or senator or county council. And it just kind of spirals from there. But I would say that the big thing is just kind of educate yourself on policy pieces, and then find the ones that really turn you on, the ones that are really exciting, and just follow your heart and follow your passion to whatever that might be. So, and then you'll find yourself talking to your local representatives. You'll find yourself organizing some of your friends, whether that's organizing your friends to go and march on Washington. I mean, in Maryland, it's, from my house, it's 45 minutes to downtown DC. So there are a lot of opportunities there. And then, for the younger ones, having your parents help, I think is huge. But get a hold of some of those policy things and become an expert at them, or as much as you can. And just realize that you can change. You can make positive change. You can change the world if you're positive and you just kind of keep pushing forward. You have to keep pushing, because power isn't just giving up, right?
Okay, let's say that there's something that I really care about, but I don't want to run for office or anything, and I don't want to be down in your, at the state house every day, or I live really far away from the state house, and I just want to, on one issue, and I want to get it changed, and I want to get it passed, and I want to do that. And I call you up and I get a meeting or something like that. What's the most effective way to communicate my point? Because I mean, if I went into your office and I was like, I want electric school buses, and you didn't know anything about electric school buses, would that be that effective?
It would depend on how you did it. The way that I would do it is I would articulate that the air pollution and the NOx inside of a school bus is 4 times higher than outside of a school bus. So the idea that you're taking your children, you're taking your most precious everything, and you're sticking them on a school bus in which the pollution levels are 4 times higher inside than outside. I mean, I think if you just use, it's a great question, right, Jesse? Because I would say if you just use facts, and I would articulate from a public health perspective, because climate change now, the climate crisis, is not just environmental. Like I argue in Annapolis all the time, and I find myself pulling in public health issues for kids, right? So you could argue that, and I think that just like pushing facts is huge, because and not to sound cynical about it, but it is a little bit more challenging in the last few years because there doesn't seem to be as much of an interest in data and facts. So you do have to kind of go in knowing that whoever you're going to meet with, hopefully they are interested in data and facts, because the data and facts on your issues and my issues are probably very aligned. So I think you just have to convince whoever you're speaking to that it is in their best interest to be on the same side as you, both from a political perspective, but what's more, from just the right thing to do.
I love everything you've said during this conversation. I really appreciate you doing your job. I think that this country has largely believed that I'm doing my job because every 4 years I vote for president. And like that's all I have to do as a citizen. But what you're saying is it's a whole lot more than that. It's not just who you vote in for president. There's a lot of important people in government. Many of them we just don't know about, even the ones we should, the ones that are our representatives. You're representing 130,000 people. They should all know you because you're very important to them, because you're the one who's representing them in their state.
And you're affecting the entire state as well, which is really huge. I mean, there are 50 states, but it's a big deal. And a lot of times your representative is going to be doing things that affect you way more than whoever the president might be.
Right.
The only thing I would say is that it really, really, really helps to be a team player, because none of this legislation is passed by myself alone. I mean, I have to talk with my chairman. I have to talk with other folks, the speaker, and all of this is getting people to believe in you and believe in your bill. Just like in life, you got to get people to be vested and believe in you. So it's all a team effort. None of this gets done by yourself.
Okay, so I've watched this. I'm very pumped up to want to either run for office. Yeah, I want to run for office. What are my first steps? What do I do? Do I just kind of walk outside and go, I'm running for office? Vote for me, everybody. Like, does that work? What do I have to do? And where could I find this information?
Probably one of the first things that I would do is talk to some people that are already in the local political world in which you aspire to be in. And if you don't know anybody, then do a search. There's do a search function in Google within your state. There's usually a website in ours. You put your address in it. It'll tell you who your elected officials are, and then you set up coffee with a couple of them, and you just talk to them about how they got where they are, and hear their story, listen to them, see what you can learn from that, develop that relationship. It's all about relationships. If you get that person and that person's like, oh my God, you're awesome. Like, you'd be a great delegate, or you'd be a great county council member, or you'd be great on the SGA. Then next thing you know, you've got a little bit of a mentor or an advocate there.
But what if they don't agree with me politically? What if I'm putting out like electric school buses and solar on things, and they're deep in the pocket of the oil industry, or their granddaddy runs the local oil company or something, and they don't want to hear anything I have to say. And so do all of the delegates around me. Like, what if it's just like, no, you should shut up, go away.
Yeah. Then you run against them. Then you take their job away from them because they don't love their job.
So, I mean, you have to file paperwork in places, and you might need to get signatures, or maybe you don't. Like, is there like a central place to find out how to do this? Like, if you can't talk to your representative and they don't like you?
In Maryland, there is a state board of elections, and there's where you can start. You go there, they will give you all the paperwork that you have to fill out. They're usually really, really nice and supportive. They will walk you through the whole thing, whether you're running for county, municipality, township, state, whatever it is. They'll walk you through the whole thing, and then you get all your paperwork, fill out all your paperwork, and file. Yeah, they'll help you.
This has been so helpful. It really has. I know that probably from your perspective, you're in this every day and it just seems like rote. But I mean, I learned a whole bunch today. I'm sure our viewers learned a whole bunch today. And it just familiarizes ourselves with something that I feel like as citizens, we should all be really familiar with, except we know like the sports contracts of every player on our teams and we know like all that stuff, but we don't know hardly anything about our legislative teams and our elected officials. And I feel like that should be reversed. If all of a sudden we woke up one day and we knew everything about, our government and hardly anything about our sports teams, that I think would be kind of perfect for our democracy, because that's where we need to be putting our efforts into how bills are passed, who the players are, how things work in our government. And so thank you so much for just shedding some light on this today and giving some hope to the fact that we can all become involved.
Well, thank you. And for everything you just said, that's why I love you guys, because you're absolutely right. It should be the opposite, right, Zac? It should be the opposite. Kids should be coming out of school knowing exactly how to change the world, not just to play a sport or, whatever that might be.
That should be a law. That's our law. Let's work on it.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. Because, I mean, yeah, if at least we knew how to do it, you didn't have to do it. As long as you knew the steps, I think that a lot more people would step up to the plate and say either I want to run or I want to get a bill passed.
It would seem accessible.
It would seem more accessible, right? Because if it's either too boring or it's too unknowable or it's too unknowable because it's too boring sounding, then I think that a lot of people just miss out on what can be very exciting. I mean, and you kind of have to fall into it either through, getting upset about something or having a family member. I mean, my father brought me to a local town meeting. As soon as I turned 18, I was allowed to vote in town meeting. He brought me there. He explained some things, and it was one of the most exciting afternoons of my life. Actually, it was the whole day. We're sitting there, we're voting on things that are going to happen in town. And to me, that was really insightful and exciting. I could just walk up to a microphone and the moderator could say, "Yes, young man, please, address the assembly." And I could talk. I could freely say whatever I wanted to do. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is what democracy is about." But there was no class of kids who were in high school and were brought to at least watch. Like, how cool would it be if you actually understood what was going to be happening? I just want to briefly just go into how convoluted is it? Is it super convoluted that most people wouldn't be able to understand it? Is that's what's holding people back, or is it
if we were to watch David at his job, on the floor kind of thing?
Like you're able to take pretty complex things, break them down into something that I can understand, but is it going to be too much work for me if I want to pass something that it's going to be oh boy, I have to, some other committee and there's some law that I didn't realize and they're going to, enforce a subpoena to the chairman of the executive underside committee.
Are you just using every word you know?
Right. I feel like it's worrisome to me because I'm okay, well, this sounds great, but am I going to get bogged down? Is it really more complicated than I'm thinking, or does this just kind of all come with the territory and you just learn it as you go along?
So it is much, much less complicated than people think, but it's like anything else. So if you've changed the tire on your car multiple times, well, it's not that hard. It's kind of a pain, but it's not that hard. If you've never changed your tire, it's really scary because you have no idea how to do it. It's the same thing. When I first went down there, all I knew was I was irritated and how dare they, and then I started realizing, it's not that hard. I mean, to come and testify in a bill, you just, in Annapolis, you come down to Annapolis and you sign up. You can sign up to testify. Sometimes you can sign up a couple of days ahead of time now because of COVID. And then you come down, and usually depending on the committee, you get a couple of minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to say, I've had my kids on my electric school bus bills come down. Each one of them have come down and sat down and given and argued or articulated their position as to why those delegates should support getting rid of, diesel school buses. It's really good for them. And I've had a bunch of high school students do it too. It's great. They're the most passionate because the high school students, I think, are the ones that are high school and college students. I have an intern right now she's awesome. And the look on her face when she realizes, when she's doing research, and she's like, So let me get this straight. The particulate matter inside of a school bus is 4 times higher than outside of a school bus. And I'm like, yes, it is. And I know what's going on in her head. Her head is, why would your generation think it's okay to put us on these school buses? This is the same thing we do with natural gas, right? Methane, natural gas. At some point, right? I mean, Zac, I know you believe this, and Jesse, your generation is probably one of the first generations that are going to look back and go, what were you people thinking? Are you absolutely insane? You pumped a gas into your home that you can't really smell, you can't really hear, you can't really see. It's extraordinarily flammable. And when every once in a while, when it blows up, kills a bunch of people and takes a couple of city blocks with it, you're surprised. So, I mean, it like takes your generation, right, to go, are you people crazy?
And you can do something about it.
You can go to your delegates and senators and your congressmen and your congresswomen and your county council and your township folks, and you can say, really, you thought this was a good idea? Like, why did your generation think this is a good idea? Like, think about that for a second.
Right. I mean, it was, I think 2 years ago, half a town in Massachusetts blew up. It was all natural gas. Right. Just the pipelines were put in the 1800s. There was cast iron and leather seals, and they blew up. And we were all like, "Oh no!" And then nothing happened about it. And it was like, "What?"
And David just gave a hack there. I don't know if you noticed it, young people watching. Right. He said how powerful you are when you show up and you talk about something, because you are passionate, and people do recognize passion. So it's like, yeah, if you're sitting at home right now like, oh, I'm young and no one listens to me, it's like, hey, follow a few simple steps and you could be heard by a lot of people.
I think a lot of people, especially, we just get to doing the same thing that our parents taught us to do, which is the same thing that their parents taught us to do. Zac, I think you hit on it earlier in this conversation, and that is debate in changing or making laws. It's set up to be really slow and deliberative. So when you want to change or create a law, it's set up to take sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years to pass. Why? Because it should be a really big thing if you're going to make or change a law. That should be huge, and it is. With that said, times are moving very, very quickly, and we have this climate crisis issue that I think supersedes all of that. So you have this kind of a budding of 2 different kinds of ways of doing things. One is where you're slow and deliberative, and the other is where we can't be slow and deliberative anymore. We've wasted the last 30 years being slow and deliberative. We gotta get moving, right? So I think it's important to try and convince people that we're in a hurry on this.
Another nice thing that you said, David, which I think scares off a lot of people, is you've got a team of lawyers that works for you. So you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to have spent years and years at law school and understand every facet of the law to make laws, because you've got teams of lawyers to help you write the stuff that, you may not fully get all the particulars of. You just need to know the basic ideas of it. So if you're scared right now watching, like, well, I got to first become a complete expert. No, you don't. I'm sure you did a lot of learning on the job.
I did. And as a matter of fact, my degree's in history. I got a degree in history, which has proven very, very beneficial to me, because I can look at a lot of what's going on politically speaking and geopolitically speaking. And it does give me pause when I look at things from a historical perspective, but it also gives me the fire in my belly to say, okay, well, looking at all the environmental issues and the climate issues, we can't wait 4 or 5 or 6 years to pass these bills. We got to move more quickly. But I think there's like 25 or 28 of the 141 delegates in the Maryland General Assembly that are lawyers. Most are not. And a citizen legislature, I think, is very unique, and it's very ingenious because it pulls from people from all walks of life, right? We have everybody in there. We have a few doctors that I know. We have lawyers that I know. We have farmers that I know. We have all kinds of people from all different walks of life. And that diversity is what makes us as a species, I think, stronger.
This has been so fascinating. This has been awesome. Like, I've been, on my local board for over 20 years, but I'm just like pumped for all the people out there who might get a little more excited about becoming part of their government. Because like you said, David, it is really rewarding. Is it work? Yes. But end of the day, I hardly ever, I always go, I'm so glad I did this.
Right. Well, I'm so excited that, like, honestly, before this call, literally, you might say, Jesse, of course you were just asking all these questions, hypothetically. And no, like, I didn't know that I could go have like coffee with my local representative. I didn't know that I could call them up and get anything other than me sending them, the change.org email or whatever, to just be like, I want this. Send. I didn't know that I could meet with my representative. So, I mean, that alone, if that's the one thing that people take away from this, that they can actually have a conversation with the representative. I mean, I don't want to toot our own horns, but in some cases, we've given you a lot of tools to be able to articulate some of these very important points. And I mean, you said that you've been using them and convincing other lawmakers about it. And I think that our viewers could do the same with their lawmakers. It's that to me is so exciting, a facet of our democracy that I think is one of the biggest secrets.
When I first got into the General Assembly, there was a very wise delegate. She was my first chair of my committee. And she said to me, David, just find out what your passion is and become like the expert at it. And then everybody will look to you for those issues. And then within 1 year, I convinced her to buy the BMW i3. She bought it. After the dealership told her that it wouldn't work for her because it only had a 70-mile range.
That's what we've heard too. Yep. Wow. And
then I said, no, that's not true. You can get the range extender. I get all technical and geeky on this stuff. And then the next weekend she got it. So yeah, it's. I thank you. I thank you both because I've been watching you for years. And when I go running, sometimes I just listen to your podcast in my ear. So, and there's such a beautiful community, I think, of people that are working on electric vehicles and solar and the transition to a sustainable. There's a big power plant in my district, which a lot of people worked very hard to shut down their coal fire, which we did. Their coal fire is kaput, and so we're trying to talk to them about converting that to battery storage and solar. So, but there's so many people in the space. I know when you guys go to the Tesla events, you can see all the other folks and the Teslanomics guys and all those guys. It's wonderful. I learned so much from everybody, and the state of Maryland does because I take it back to the General Assembly.
That's awesome. Wow. It's such a great community. Thank you so much for all the work you do. I mean, it's just I urge our viewers to go take a look. I mean, you've passed so many bills. You're working on so many bills that make a huge difference in the things we talk about on the show all the time. So thank you so much, because we should probably have a segment on the show that's more of the positive, like the stuff that's actually. We're usually focused on the negative, but like there's a lot of positive stuff going on and you're a part of it. So thank you.
Thanks for being a part of it with me. I appreciate it, both of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching Now You Know. We work hard to bring you videos about things that we think you'll find useful, but we need to know from you what you want to see. So leave your comments below. Also, don't forget to go over to our Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you can watch our Patreon bonus story every week on Tesla Time News. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.